Well, I won't go there again, said Elise. What a stupid tea party it was. Just then, she saw a door in one of the trees. How curious, she thought. But everything is strange today. I think I'll go in. So she went in. And there she was, back in the long room with the little glass table. At once, she picked up the gold key from the table, unlocked the little door into the garden, and then began to eat a piece of mushroom. When she was down to about 30 centimeters high, she walked through the door, and then, at last, she was in the beautiful garden with its green trees and bright flowers. Chapter 6: The Queen's Game of Croquet. Near the door there was a rose tree and 3 gardeners, who were looking at the roses in a very worried way. What's the matter? Elise said to them. You see, miss, said the first gardener, these roses are white, but the Queen only likes red roses, and she. The Queen, said the second gardener suddenly, and at once, the 3 gardeners lay down flat on their faces. Elise turned round and saw a great crowd of people. It was a pack of cards, walking through the garden. There were clubs, they were soldiers, and diamonds, and 10 little children, they were hearts. Next came some kings and queens. Then Elise saw the white rabbit, and behind him, the knave of hearts. And last of all, came the king and queen of hearts. When the crowd came near to Elise, they all stopped and looked at her, and the queen said, Who are you? My name is Elise, your majesty, said Elise very politely. But she thought to herself, they're only a pack of cards. I don't need to be afraid of them. And who are these? Said the queen, looking at the 3 gardeners. Then she saw the white roses, and her face turned red and angry. Off with their heads, she shouted. And soldiers hurried up to take the gardeners away. The queen turned to Elise. Can you play croquet? She shouted. Yes, shouted Elise. Come on, then, shouted the queen. The crowd began to move on, and Elise went with them. It's a very fine day, said a worried voice in her ear. Elise saw that the white rabbit was by her side. Very fine, said Elise. Where's the Duchess? Shh, said the rabbit in a hurried voice. She's in prison, waiting for execution. What for? Said Elise. But just then the queen shouted, Get to your places, and the game began. It was the strangest game of croquet in Elise's life. The balls were hedgehogs, and the mallets were flamingos. And the hoops were made by soldiers, who turned over and stood on their hands and feet. Elise held her flamingo's body under her arm, but the flamingo turned its long neck first this way and then that way. At last, Elise was ready to hit the ball with the flamingo's head. But by then, the hedgehog was tired of waiting and was walking away across the croquet ground. And when both the flamingo and the hedgehog were ready, there was no hoop. The soldiers too were always getting up and walking away. It really was a very difficult game, Elise thought. The players all played at the same time, and they were always arguing and fighting. For hedgehogs, nobody could agree about anything. Very soon, the queen was wildly angry and went around shouting off with his head, or off with her head, about once a minute. Elise began to feel worried. The queen is sure to argue with me soon, she thought. And what will happen to me then? They're cutting people's heads off all the time. Yeah. I'm surprised there is anyone left alive. Just then she saw something very strange. She watched carefully, and after a minute or two she saw that the thing was a grin. "It's the Cheshire Cat," she said to herself. "Now I'll have somebody to talk to." "How are you getting on?" said the cat, when its mouth appeared. Elise waited. "I can't talk to something without ears," she thought. Slowly the cat's eyes, then its ears, and then the rest of its head appeared. But it stopped at the neck. And its body did not appear. Elise began to tell the cat all about the game. "It's very difficult to play," she said. "Everybody argues all the time, and the hoops and the hedgehogs walk away." "How do you like the queen?" said the cat quietly. "I don't," said Elise. "She's very..." Just then she saw the queen behind her, so she went on, "Clever. She's the best player here." The queen smiled and walked past. "Who are you talking to?" said the king. He came up behind Elise and looked at the cat's head in surprise. "It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire Cat," said Elise. "I'm not sure that I like it," said the king. "But it can touch my hand if it likes." "I prefer not to," said the cat. "Well," said the king angrily. He called out to the queen, "My dear, there's a cat here, and I don't like it." The queen did not look round. "Off with its head," she shouted. "Call for the executioner." Elise was a little worried for her friend, but when the executioner arrived, everybody began to argue. "I can't cut off a head," said the executioner, "if there isn't a body to cut it off from." "You can cut the head off," said the king, "from anything that's got a head." "If somebody doesn't do something quickly," said the queen, "I'll cut everybody's head off." Nobody liked that plan very much, so they all turned to Elise. "And what do you say?" they cried. "The cat belongs to the Duchess," said Elise carefully. "Perhaps you could ask her about it." "She's in prison," the queen said to the executioner. "Bring her here at once." But then the cat's head slowly began to vanish, and when the executioner came back with the Duchess, there was nothing there. The king ran wildly up and down, looking for the cat, and the Duchess put her arm round Elise. "I'm so pleased to see you again, my dear," she said. "Let's get on with the game," the queen said angrily, and Elise followed her back to the croquet ground. The game went on, but all the time the queen was arguing and shouting, "Off with his head," or "Off with her head." Soon there were no hoops left, because the soldiers, who were the hoops, were too busy taking everybody to prison. And at the end there were only 3 players left: the king, the queen, and Elise. The queen stopped shouting and said to Elise, "Have you seen the mock turtle yet?" "No," said Elise. "I'm not sure what a mock turtle is." "Then come with me," said the queen. They found the mock turtle down by the sea. Next to him was a griffon, asleep in the sun. Then the queen hurried away, saying, "I have to get on with some executions." The griffon woke up and said sleepily to Elise, "It's just talk, you know. They never execute anybody." Elise was pleased to hear this. She felt a little afraid of the griffon and the mock turtle, because they were so large. But they were very friendly, and sang songs and told her many stories about their lives. The mock turtle was in the middle of a very sad song when they all heard a shout a long way away. "It's beginning. Come on. We must hurry," cried the griffon. It took Elise by the hand and began to run. Chapter 7. Who Stole the Tarts? The king and queen of hearts were sitting on their thrones when Elise and the griffon arrived. There was a great crowd of birds and animals, and all the pack of cards. Soldiers stood all around the Knave of Hearts, and near the king was the white rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand. In the middle of the room there was a table, with a large plate of tarts on it. They look good, thought Elise, who was feeling a little hungry. Then the white rabbit called out loudly, "Silence! The trial of the Knave of Hearts will now begin." He took out a long piece of paper, and read. "The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts. All on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts. And took them all away." "Very good," said the king. "Call the first witness." Elise looked at the jury, who were now writing everything down. It was a very strange jury. Some of the jurymen were animals, and the others were birds. Then the white rabbit blew his trumpet 3 times, and called out, "First witness." The first witness was the hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other hand. "I'm very sorry, Your Majesty," he said. "I was in the middle of tea when the trial began." "Take off your hat," the king said. "It isn't mine," said the hatter. "Stolen." "Write that down," the king said to the jury. "I keep hats to sell," explained the hatter. "I don't have a hat myself. I'm a hatter." "Give your evidence," said the king, "or we'll cut your head off." The hatter's face turned white. "I'm a poor man, Your Majesty," he began, in a shaking voice. Just then Elise had a strange feeling. He thought I was a gardener, but said I could not swim. He tells them that I have not gone. We know that this is true. If she decide to hurry on, what will they do to you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. You gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you. But they were mine before. That's a very important piece of evidence, said the king. He looked very pleased. Now the jury must. If anybody in the jury can explain that letter, said Elise, she was not afraid of anything now, because she was much bigger than everybody in the room. I'll give him 6 pence. It's all nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. The jury busily wrote this down. She thinks it's all nonsense. All nonsense, eh? Said the king. He read some of the words again. But said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He said to the knave. The knave's face was sad. Do I look like a swimmer? He said. And he didn't. Because he was made of paper. The king smiled. I understand everything now, he said. There are the tarts, and here is the Knave of Hearts. And now the jury must decide who the thief is. No, no, said the queen. Off with his head. The jury can say what it thinks later. What nonsense, said Elise loudly. The jury must decide first. You can't. Be quiet, said the queen, her face turning red. I won't, said Elise. Off with her head, screamed the queen. Nobody moved. It doesn't matter what you say, said Elise. You're only a pack of cards. Then the pack of cards flew up into the sky and began to fall on Elise's face. She gave a little scream and woke up. She was lying next to her sister under the trees, and some leaves were falling on her face. Wake up, Elise dear, said her sister. You've been asleep a long time. Oh, I've had a very curious dream, said Elise, and she told her sister all about the strange adventures in her wonderful dream. End. Hope you have enjoyed.